Thanks for joining me on episode 370 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Paulson from Kara. I challenge you to discover your true identity and calling so you can be empowered to live every day to the fullest. One way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend Scott Mader.
That's often, going back to those courses that we buy that then sit on the shelf and never do anything. That's often what happened there. I bought a course because it was shiny and it was cool and I thought it would teach me and it would be the magic solution to all of my problems. And then what happens is I discover that the truth is I'm both the problem and the solution.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's episode about developing your influence through stewarding your treasures, I talk with you about knowing if you are spending wisely or foolishly, identifying how to use money to develop influence with wisdom, and why money spent wisely will help build your influence.
As we talk about stewarding your treasures, wouldn't it be great if you could support this podcast and do it without costing yourself an extra dime? Turns out you can. All you have to do is use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon when you're ready to make a purchase via Amazon, and a small commission will come back to support the show. If you enjoy the show when you're ready to buy from Amazon, just use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon.
When I'm working with clients, either as personal financial coach or as a small business coach, one of the areas that people have a lot of struggle with a lot of times is figuring out if the money that they're spending is well spent. It's the dollars that I'm using. Are they doing things that I want them to do? Whether it's in business and you're talking about something like marketing to build your influence, or whether it's in your personal budget and you're trying to figure out if the things that you're spending are actually having an impact on your life and letting you move towards living out your calling, or are they just money that you're not really spending effectively or efficiently. And it comes to be a question a lot of times of how do you even know? How do you tell? What do you look for to know that you're spending money wisely instead of foolishly? And the biggest thing is not just looking at things like, do I get a return on my investment? Do I make more money than I spend? These sorts of things. A lot of times we end up getting focused on our expenses and cutting our expenses, or other times we get focused on our income and thinking about how can we make more money. But the truth is, it isn't about income and it's not about expenses. It's about the space between the two. It's about creating room between how much you make and how much you spend. It's there that your ability to get out of debt, that your ability to grow wealth, your ability to give and serve others and help others, that comes out of that difference between income and expenses. That's the real magic to focus on to know if you're spending wisely or foolishly. And to do that, you have to recognize the fact that you make money, but what you do with the money needs to be aligned with your values, with your calling, with your purpose. So the real energy and time needs to be spent on first figuring out what is it that you're really going after? What is it that you really are being called to do? What is it that, not just in terms of work or purpose, but what is it that you uniquely are able to do in the position that you're in with the money that you have? And when you begin to identify those values and those priorities, then all of a sudden the spending decisions become much easier, because you can look at something like going out to eat and you can think, does this further my ability to do those things that I'm called to do? And if the answer is no, well, then it's a lot easier to give up going out to eat. By the same token, you can look at something like investing some money in a new course or a new training or gaining some sort of knowledge, and you can think, does this knowledge further me along the path towards living out my calling? Yes, it does. Even though that's an expensive course, I should invest in it, both the money and the time to actually do it. Because one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make is buying courses and collecting them, but never actually using them. So if you want to talk about building influence with money, the way you do it is to go back to the first two things that we usually talk about, developing yourself and developing others. You need to use your money to find opportunities to grow yourself in the path towards your calling, and then use your money to find opportunities to serve others with that knowledge and those skills that you have. The wisdom here comes in looking for those opportunities where, yes, it may cost you a little bit, but it puts you in a room with people who you truly can serve, who you truly can help, and God wants you to be there. And when you find those things that are aligned with your priorities, aligned with your values, aligned with your calling, then go ahead and invest in them. Now, don't invest in a foolish way. I would never suggest going into debt to do these sorts of things. The truth is, if God wants you to be doing that, God will also provide the opportunity and the path and the way to do it without debt. At least that's been my experience. And often when I force the issue and go ahead and try to make it happen because I want it to happen and I leverage debt, it ends up not being what I really figured out was what God wanted me to do all too often. And so then I have spent money, but I haven't actually gained in influence. I haven't actually built myself up in a way where I can serve others using my skills and my knowledge and my calling. That's often, going back to those courses that we buy that then sit on the shelf and never do anything. That's often what happened there. I bought a course because it was shiny and it was cool and I thought it would teach me and it would be the magic solution to all of my problems. And then what happens is I discover that the truth is I'm both the problem and the solution, that I need to be doing the hard work. A magic course isn't going to solve the problem. And in fact, often will take away time and energy that would have helped me grow and would have helped me solve the problem. So the truth is that you need to identify what your priorities and your values are. And then you need to spend money in a way that helps you grow in alignment with those values and those priorities. And if you do that, it is inevitable that you will grow in influence. And again, this is personal, business, it doesn't matter. The effect is still the same. As you move into alignment with your calling, you will discover that you gain more and more influence with those who you serve because they will recognize in you the fact that you are doing those things that God has called you to do. People can see it, people can smell it without you even telling them. It just happens. I've seen it happen time after time after time as I work with clients and get them aligned with living out their calling so that they can do what they're called to do and get rid of the barriers in their time, their talent, and their treasures that are holding them back from doing that. And I encourage you to do the same. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of treasures, you can sign up for our treasures tips by going to inspiredstewardship.com/treasures or text in the U.S. 44222 treasures tips. And we'll send you 5 weeks of our best tips on stewarding your treasures. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.